Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again with one more video lecture. Dear students, this is the last lecture of this topic, getting to know about plants. In the previous lecture, I have discussed about the structure of flower. Dear students, in the structure of flower, I have defined different parts of the flower: sepals, petals, carpel and pistil. Okay, sepals and petals are the vegetative parts of the, or we can say they are the non-sexual parts of the flower, and stamens and carpel, they are the reproductive parts of the flower. Dear students, there are some flowers in which both the male part and the female reproductive part are present. That flower is known as bisexual flower. What? The flower in which both male and female reproductive parts, when they are present in the same flower, that flower is known as bisexual flower. Okay? Then what is unisexual flower? The flower in which either stamens or carpels are present. Okay? Those flowers are known as unisexual flowers. Then, what are the difference between the bisexual and flower and unisexual flowers? So we can here say that bisexual flowers are those flowers in which both male and female reproductive parts are present in the same flower. एक ही फ्लावर में दोनों मेल रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट एंड फीमेल रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट प्रेजेंट होगा, उस फ्लावर को हम कहेंगे बाइसेक्सुअल फ्लावर. ओके. यूनिसेक्सुअल फ्लावर वो फ्लावर जिसमें या तो स्टेमेंस ही प्रेजेंट होंगे या ही कार्पेल्स प्रेजेंट होंगे, दोनों प्रेजेंट नहीं हो सकते हैं, उस फ्लावर को हम कहेंगे यूनिसेक्सुअल फ्लावर. अब यूनिसेक्सुअल फ्लावर की बात करेंगे. अगर यूनिसेक्सुअल फ्लावर में ओनली स्टेमेंस आर प्रेजेंट, दैट इज कॉल्ड स्टेमिनेट फ्लावर. स्टेमिनेट फ्लावर क्यों कहेंगे? क्योंकि उसमें स्टेमेंस ही प्रेजेंट है. स्टेमेंस क्या है? मेल रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट ऑफ ए फ्लावर. मेल रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट ऑफ ए फ्लावर. In the previous lecture, I have discussed with you that male reproductive part of flower, that is known as stamen. Okay, that is known as stamen. This stamen has two parts, anther and filament. Okay, this is bilobed. Okay, this whole is known as stamen. This is the male reproductive part, male reproductive part of flower, male reproductive part of flower. Okay, if in flower only carpels are present or only pistils are present, that is known as pistillate flowers. That is known as pistillate flower. Okay, so there can be two types of flowers, either bisexual flowers or unisexual flowers. Bisexual flowers are those flowers in which both male and female reproductive parts are present in the same flower. That is known as bisexual flower. And in unisexual flower, then only stamen or carpel are present. If stamen are present, that flower is known as staminate flower. And if only carpel are present, carpel's next name, or we can say carpel is also known as pistil. That flower is known as pistillate flower. Okay. Dear students, now we have to know about what is pollination. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a flower. Okay, when there is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a flower is known as pollination. Anther, where are anthers present? I told you this stamen had two parts, anther and filament. In anther there are pollens present. In anther there are pollens present. And stigma is the one of the part of the pistil, stigma, style, and ovary. When there is the transfer of pollen grain from this anther to the stigma, from this male reproductive part to the female reproductive part, that process is known as pollination. I hope so you got it. Once again, I will define it. Pollination is the process in which there is the transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma, from anther, male reproductive part of the plant flower, to the female reproductive part of the flower. That process is known as pollination. Okay, pollination is of two types. One, self-pollination. Second, cross-pollination. What is self-pollination? Self-pollination is the pollen grains. When pollen grains, they are transferred from anther to the stigma of the same flower. Suppose this is one flower. If transfer of pollen grain from male reproductive part to the female reproductive part takes place only in this flower, pollen grain that is of this flower, stigma that is of this flower, that pollination is known as self-pollination. Okay, when pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma of the same flower, एक ही फ्लावर में एंथर, एक ही फ्लावर का एंथर भी होगा, उसी फ्लावर का स्टिग्मा होगा. जब एंथर ट्रांसफर होगा किससे, एंथर से पोलन ट्रांसफर होंगे किससे, एंथर से स्टिग्मा तक इसी फ्लावर में, इस पोलिनेशन को हम कहेंगे सेल्फ पोलिनेशन. What is cross pollination? Pollen grains are transferred from anther of one flower and to the stigma of another flower of same or different plant. Okay? अब यहाँ पे आपको समझना है कि अब जब पोलन ग्रेन ट्रांसफर होगा कहाँ से, एंथर से टू द स्टिग्मा, या तो इसी एक ही प्लांट में दो डिफरेंट फ्लावर्स होंगे, या दो डिफरेंट प्लांट्स के दो डिफरेंट प्लांट्स होंगे और फ्लावर भी फिर डिफरेंट होंगे जब दो डिफरेंट प्लांट्स होंगे. इसको हम कहेंगे क्रॉस पोलिनेशन. सेल्फ पोलिनेशन, only one flower and transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma in only that flower, that is known as self pollination. In cross pollination, there is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma, either two different flowers of the same plant or between the different plants. Okay, that is known as cross pollination. There are different agents by which pollination takes place. We have to transport, for the process of pollination, pollen grain have to transfer from the anther to the stigma. So it can take place either by wind, it can take place either by water in aquatic plants, it can also take place by insects or some other animals. There are different agents by which pollination takes place, or there are different agents through which the pollen grains, they are transferred from anther to the stigma. They can be transferred from anther to the stigma by wind. They can be transferred from anther to the stigma by insects. They can be transferred from anther to the stigma by some other animals. They can be transferred from anther to the stigma by water if aquatic plants are there. Okay. The pollen grains, they are transferred from the anther to the stigma of either the same flower or of another flower, the same kind, by wind or by water or by insects. That process is known as pollination, as I have already told you that. After pollination, what happens? The ovary that swells up and changes into fruit, and the ovules changes into seed. When I have discussed you that the shape, this is the female reproductive part of a flower. This whole part is known as either carpel or we can say pistil. It has three parts. This is known as stigma. This middle part is known as style. And this is known as basal part, swollen basal part, that is known as ovary. In ovary, there are ovules. What I told you that the pollen grains, they are transferred from male anther to the stigma here. After that, these pollen grains are transferred from this stigma through this tube style to the ovary here. Okay, they get fertilized, okay, with these ovules. Okay, and after that what happens? This ovary small and basal that get changed. After pollination what happens? Fertilization happens. Fusion of male and female gametes. Female gamete is your ovules and male gamete is your pollen. They get fused with each other. Fertilization takes place. After fertilization, this ovary that gets changed into fruit, and these ovules they get changed into seeds. So if I said you that these ovules are seeds and this fruit that is the ovary. Ovary is the fruit and these ovules they are the seeds. So in fruits the seed they are ovules and the fruit that is the ovary. The fruit that is the ovary and the seeds they are the ovules. Hope so you got it. What is pollination? What are the two types of pollination? What is fertilization? How pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma? What are the agents? The agents may be insects, the agent may be wind, the agent may be water, the agent may be either some animal, other animal also. Okay, this is all about